Silence. It can feel like nothing, but it is never empty. Silence is weight. It is presence. It is a mirror that forces you to see what you'd rather avoid. Have you ever walked away from a conversation with the haunting feeling that something essential was lost? You spoke, you defended yourself, you put your thoughts into words. And still, when it was all over, you felt small, empty, as if every sentence drained you instead of filling you. It happens more often than we admit. In heated debates, in family arguments, in quiet exchanges with people who know exactly how to press your deepest wounds. They raise their voice, they interrupt, they mock, they smile with arrogance disguised as certainty. And there you are, searching for the right words, convinced that if you just explain a little more clearly, they will finally understand you. But they don't, they never do. And you walk away carrying the weight of defeat, even though the truth might have been on your side. Why does it feel this way? Why does silence feel like surrender, while endless talking feels like the only form of power? Because from the moment we were children, we were taught that to stay silent is weakness. At school, when someone insulted you, the teachers told you, stand up for yourself. At home, when siblings pushed your boundaries, you were told, say something back. Society trained us that words are our weapons, that if you don't fight, you are defeated, that silence is a loss. But what if this belief is an illusion? Friedrich Nietzsche, perhaps the most feared thinker of the 19th century, saw through this illusion. He noticed something the rest of us hide from. Those who argue the most are often the weakest. The louder the defense, the more fragile the truth. People who cannot stop talking, who cannot stand silence, reveal something they do not want you to see, their insecurity. And yet we have been trained to envy them, to mistake noise for confidence, to believe that whoever speaks loudest must know best. But Nietzsche suggested the opposite, that true power lives not in words, but in their absence. Silence is not emptiness. Silence unsettles because it is not passive. It destabilizes. It forces the other to hear themselves without distraction, and in that space they cannot escape. This is for you, who have sat quietly while others drowned the air with noise. For you who have swallowed your thoughts because you feared they would be misunderstood. For you who have been told your silence means you are weak. Maybe you've confused your silence with surrender. But today, I want to show you that silence can be your sharpest blade. True victory doesn't belong to those who speak the most. It belongs to those who don't need to speak at all. Look closely at arguments. Watch them unfold. You will see the same pattern. The need to react, to respond, to justify, comes not from strength, but from fear. Fear of being wrong. Fear of being forgotten. Fear of losing ground. And behind that, fear sits the ego. The ego cannot tolerate silence. Silence feels like death to it. It wants recognition, approval, applause. It wants to win, no matter the cost. And so it shouts, defends, justifies. It throws words into the air like confetti, hoping the sheer noise will cover its trembling. Nietzsche saw this with terrifying clarity. He believed that most arguments are not about truth at all. They are about survival, about keeping the fragile ego intact. People don't argue to discover reality. They argue to protect the story they tell themselves. Think about the last time you defended yourself. Were you really trying to explain your position, or were you desperately trying not to feel invisible, foolish, powerless? The need to prove yourself is already a sign you've stepped into their arena, and the moment you enter, you've lost. Because truth doesn't need defending, truth simply is. Nietzsche called this obsession herd morality. the morality of those who crave acceptance above all else, the morality of the crowd that survives by conformity, by being liked, by staying within the lines. And it is precisely this morality that keeps you small, because when you seek recognition, you hand over your power to those who decide whether to give it. So what does true strength look like? It is the refusal to beg for understanding. It is the calm of one who knows who they are, even in the face of laughter, rejection, or mockery. It is the silence of someone who does not crumble when misunderstood. This silence is not surrender. It is mastery. And Nietzsche gave this mastery a name: the Übermensch, the overman, the human being who transcends the fragile games of approval and rejection, who creates meaning instead of begging for it, who lives not in reaction but in creation. The Übermensch does not waste breath on endless arguments. He does not drown insecurity in explanations. He does not beg to be heard. He shapes the world in his own image. And often he does this silently. He does not see words as a constant stream, but as a precious resource. He chooses them with precision. He speaks when it matters, and when it doesn't, he remains still. Because he knows what most ignore: silence is a language. His silence is not absence, it is weight. It is authority. It is the unshakable presence that makes others nervous, because they cannot control it. They cannot predict it. They cannot bend it. Watch what happens when silence stretches in a room. People shift in their seats. They laugh nervously. They fill the air with noise. Why? Because silence exposes them. Silence forces them to meet themselves without distraction. And many cannot bear it. This is the silence of the Übermensch. It does not retreat. It does not apologize. It does not beg. It simply stands, unshaken. And in a world drowning in words, the one who masters silence does not need to shout. He has already won. You've noticed it, haven't you? That uneasy moment when silence stretches just a little too long. The glance across the table, the sudden urge to clear your throat, the nervous laugh that escapes without your permission. What you're feeling in that moment is not the other person, it's yourself. Their silence becomes a mirror, and suddenly you can't escape what you see reflected back. Silence unsettles because it destroys the script. The world expects noise. It expects reaction, defense, the predictable rhythm of back and forth. When you refuse to play, when you hold yourself still, the other person begins to collapse. Their voice wavers. Their arguments lose their edge. They reveal not certainty, but insecurity. This is the hidden violence of silence. You don't have to cut with sharp replies. You don't have to crush them with clever comebacks. You don't even have to explain. By withholding, you force them to hear the one voice they cannot silence, their own. And for most, that voice is unbearable. Modern psychology has confirmed what Nietzsche sensed long before. When silence enters confrontation, it is almost always perceived as judgment. The human brain panics without feedback. The amygdala fires, anxiety rises, insecurity floods the body. Suddenly, the one speaking feels naked, exposed, desperate to know what the silence means. Manipulators survive on your reaction. Their strategy is to provoke you, to control you through your responses. But what happens when you give them nothing? No raised voice, no defense, no visible frustration, just presence. The manipulator begins to crumble. They need your reaction like air, and when you withhold it, they suffocate. This is why silence is not passive. It is active, it is dangerous, it is charged. But silence is not only difficult for others, it is difficult for you. Because when you hold back your words, you feel the fire inside, the unbearable itch to justify yourself, to scream, to prove them wrong. Mastering silence means resisting that pull. It means killing the part of you that still needs permission, still needs validation, still needs applause. Do you know why most people fail to master it? Because they confuse silence with weakness. They tell themselves they're being mature by avoiding conflict, but deep down, it's not maturity, it's fear. And people notice. They sense that your silence does not radiate presence but absence. And they push harder. They impose more because they know you will not resist. That silence costs you more than noise ever could. It eats away until you forget your own voice. Nietzsche called this the morality of slaves, the values created by the powerless to survive in a world run by the strong. Humility, obedience, surrender, all praised as noble, all disguises for fear. But silence does not have to be this. It can be reborn. The silence of submission can die, and in its place a new silence can emerge, a silence that radiates strength, that does not bend, does not apologize, does not beg. To reach this silence, you must first endure the storm inside, the unbearable desire to react, the compulsion to speak, the terror of being misjudged. You must sit in that fire until it burns away everything false. And when it does, you realize you owe no one an explanation. You owe no one a performance. You owe no one your energy. And then something shifts. You become unpredictable. People can no longer read you. They don't know if you will reply or remain still. They grow cautious. They measure their words. They circle your silence like prey around a predator. And in that uncertainty, you have already won. Because silence does not make you smaller. It makes you magnetic. It draws others into your orbit. They lean in, desperate for a signal, desperate to know what you're thinking, desperate for a glimpse behind the wall you've built. But this kind of silence must not be mistaken for passivity. You are not escaping. You are conserving energy, sharpening your presence, waiting. And when you do choose to speak, when you break the silence with a single sentence, it lands like a hammer, not because it is loud, but because the silence before it has already carved the stage for it to echo. Look at your life. Count the moments you wasted explaining yourself to people who never wanted to understand. Count the nights you rehearsed arguments in your head, trying to find the perfect words to win a war that was never worth fighting. How many times did you believe noise was strength? How many times did you believe silence was defeat? Enough. The world does not need more voices shouting to be heard. It needs fewer voices, but stronger presences. People who bend reality not with volume, but with stillness. People who command respect without needing to demand it. People whose silence is heavier than the noise of 1,000 others. Silence is not emptiness. Silence is not weakness. Silence is not absence. Silence is mastery. Silence is the highest expression of power because it proves you are no longer trapped by the hunger to be validated. You are no longer enslaved by the need to be accepted. You are no longer owned by the fear of being misunderstood. True silence is not retreat. It is arrival. It is the presence of someone who already knows who they are and does not need to prove it. It is steadiness in a world addicted to noise. It is strength without display, power without performance. It is the quiet certainty that nothing more is needed. And in that certainty, there is freedom. So look honestly. How many times have you silenced your own truth out of fear of conflict? How many times have you handed away your power just to keep peace that was never real? How many times have you allowed others to fill the air while you disappeared? That silence must end. In its place, let another rise. The silence that does not beg. The silence that commands. The silence that declares without a word, I am here, and I am unshakable. Do you have the courage to choose it? Then write it below. I choose the silence that commands respect, not for me, but for you, as a vow to yourself, as a declaration that you will no longer confuse submission with strength. Because the world is loud, the world is frantic, the world is desperate, but presence, true presence, always belongs to the few who master silence. And if you become one of them, you will not need to win arguments anymore. You will not need to convince. You will not need to beg. You will have already won before the first word is spoken. Because silence is not the absence of sound. It is the presence of self. It is the rare courage to stand unshaken in a world that trembles with noise. Most people will never know this strength. They will spend their lives defending themselves, fighting for recognition, pleading to be heard. But you can choose differently. You can choose the silence that steadies instead of retreats. The silence that cuts deeper than words, yet heals more than any apology. The silence that radiates authority without aggression and compassion without weakness. And here is the secret. Once you embody this silence, you will no longer fear being misunderstood, because you will know that what you are cannot be diminished by the noise of others. So if tonight's silence has stirred something within you, let it not fade with the ending of these words. Carry it into your next conversation, your next conflict, your next quiet night alone. And when the world shouts, when the noise rises like a storm, stand in your silence. Let it be your armor, let it be your home. Subscribe to Midnight Philosophers and keep walking with us through the shadows and the light. Because every soul searching in the dark deserves a companion, and in this silence you may finally discover you were never truly alone.